Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 22nd of April 2023, a little bit later than normal. Remember, this is referring to activity that took place yesterday, and of course, with fighting going on today and Ukraine being ahead of certainly myself in terms of time, things will have changed today already, so do bear that in mind. Let's go straight to the front line, indeed to the northeast sector from Kupiansk to Svatovo to Kreminna. This axis down here on my map, that looks rather like this. And we're going to look at some activity that's taken place up in the north in the Kupiansk, just northeast of Kupiansk, in Sinkivka, Liman-Pershi area. Liman-Pershi is this town that has swapped hands a number of times. It seems to be in Russian hands at the moment. The ISW, the American military think tank, says that there were unsuccessful ground attacks. The Russians conducted unsuccessful ground attacks, this is according to Ukrainians, while attempting to improve their tactical positions near Liman-Pershi. On the other hand, Russian MOD claimed that Russian forces repelled 4 Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups near Liman-Pershi. So, the Ukrainians claiming the Russians making trying to improve their tactical positions, and the Russians claiming that Ukrainians are doing that. So something is happening up there around Liman-Pershi. That much is for certain. Both sides claiming the other side is attacking in the area. Other than that, it's the usual kind of, Terny, Torska, usual places that are mentioned on a daily basis by the ISW. Russian blogger claimed that Russian forces advanced near Sinkivka, that's back up near Liman-Pershi again, but they also conducted unsuccessful ground attacks near northwest and west of Kreminna at Torsky, Terny and Nevska. So Nevska is just slightly further north there, Terny, Torska. Sinkivka, as I say, is up near Liman-Pershi. Right, so not really too much to report on that front. Rebar says nothing of, oops, that's not Rebar. Rebar, the pro-Russian source, says nothing about any activity north of Bakhmut. Doesn't feature at all. We do have some footage. This is a claim that the footage posted on April the 20th shows Russian 98th Guards Airborne Division forces striking a Ukrainian tank near Kreminna. I have tried to find geolocation for this. This is all over Twitter as well. This is it on Telegram. I don't even know whether that tank is kind of doing anything, whether it's been disabled anyway. But that is a Ukrainian tank taking one for the team there, I guess. What the text says below is footage of the destruction of Ukrainian T-64BV near Kreminna. The footage shows the work of the 98th Airborne Guards Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation on the location of the equipment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the Svatovo-Kreminna direction. After an aimed strike by paratroopers, a Ukrainian T-64B tank was destroyed. Despite all the difficulties, the Russian army continues to advance in the Svatovo-Kreminna direction. No evidence of that. Constantly destroying strongholds. No evidence of that. Military equipment and personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine. So they're constantly destroying lots of Ukrainian stuff. Here we have one tank, didn't seem to be very mobile, is being destroyed. But nonetheless, that is a piece of equipment that the Ukrainians won't be able to use again, that's for sure. And then we come down to Bakhmut. Before we do so, let's look at Vuhledar's map here of the Svatovo to Kreminna axis, and as mentioned, there's this activity near Liman-Pershi, and that's that. So really, we'll move on to Bakhmut. Bakhmut looks as it has done for the preceding couple of weeks, which is this constriction of the Ukrainian forces around the north, the south, and the east. There's been lots of talk about the Russians getting very close to and interdicting perhaps the highway coming in through Kromove, as you can see there, a little red arrow to suggest that road is in trouble. So that means that supplies, indeed supplies haven't been able to get down that road for some time now, and I think the Ukrainians are relying mainly on this road coming in to the south through Avdivka, the T0506 that they have 04, sorry, that they've pushed the Russians away from successfully. However, if the Russians gain a foothold to the south of this 00506 highway, then they will be able to sight possibly the one to the south, and that would cause a real problem. So although people like reporting from Ukraine, pro-Ukrainian source on YouTube was saying that the Ukrainians are having success pushing the Russians back in the north and whatnot, the next day it's like, yeah, okay, they're in trouble up around here. So I think you need to be careful. I know Ukrainian reporting from Ukraine has got sources on the ground, but sometimes I think it's quite positive, and you get a sense that things are going really well, and then the next day, actually, that doesn't seem to be the case. So we must be skeptical always. Kenneth Gregg, Swedish soldier operating in Ukraine, says, and again, take what he says with a large pinch of salt, but I think it's quite, sometimes there are some nice little nuggets in there that give you a bit of an insight. He says the new Russian reinforcements and the activation of the reserves have given the Russians new offensive momentum in Bakhmut. So the Russians have new momentum. We abandoned the railway station and retreated a few blocks to the west. They also advanced towards the key road that connects Chasiv and Bakhmut through Kromova. That's a road I was just talking about to the north, but heavy fighting is currently going on there. Russian forces also advanced westwards from the direction of Dubova-Vasilivka and took the ridges north and east of Avdivka. At the time of writing, information was received that we had counterattacked at a railway station with a larger force, but I have no confirmation of this information. Okay, so we go back to Poulet-Volant's map. This is to say that there's activity going on to the north here. There is a lot of talk about there being a really quite an intricate network of trenches around here that makes it difficult for the Russians to advance. They might take one bit of trench, but then it's connected in a whole system, and it's not like they then have the whole area. So it would be slow going and difficult for the Russians to make significant advances quickly in this area, but the advances they appear to be making. Well, if we go to, I think that's enough from Kenneth Gregg in that particular area. He goes on to talk about Avdivka after that. So if we go to check this chap out. So he's a Ukrainian in Bakhmut, and he says, and again, this is yesterday afternoon. So he says, I'm going to turn the sound off. No, this isn't one. There's another one of what he says with subtitles. Anyway, No Reports says today the guys not only managed to repel and hold positions, but also captured prisoners. So now we have valuable information about the actions of the enemy, and there's quite a bit of footage coming out of captured Russians in the Bakhmut area. So that has been over the last 3 or 4 days quite a number of captured troops. War Mapper indicates that there are no confirmed changes of control over the last 24 hours. So actually a day of stasis, according to them. However, I take that with a pinch of salt, because I'm fairly sure that there have been movements. In the front, says No Reports pro-Ukrainian mapper. In Bakhmut, the fighting mainly takes place in the northwest and south. Russian forces claim progress towards Bakhmut playground, but we lack visual confirmation. A large-scale attack on the 00506 near Kromova was repulsed. Dozens of Russian dead. Due to security reasons, I cannot post certain information happening that reveals the actual situation. I do add some frames from the battles there, and he just shows some footage of people sort of running through the ruins of Bakhmut. So the pro-Russian mapper, Suriyat Maps, is the only one that shows any explicit territorial gains, this time for the Russians, but really very minor. Small advance along the Hrihoria Skovorody and Hirligiv streets, trying to approach to Industrial College under heavy clashes with the Ukrainian army. So that's I will show you on my map where that is to give you a better sense of the situation. So moving down, no news of Bilahorivka, no news of Spirina, just moving straight down to Bakhmut on my map. Remember, the red lines pertain to Suriyat Maps, it's a pro-Russian mapper, and the yellow lines pertain to the pro-Ukrainian mapper, Deep State Maps. I need to change my blue lines around here, so sorry. Always look at the red and yellow, don't necessarily think about the blue, because I go on the offensive lines rather than defensive lines. So that's why the blue for me isn't particularly accurate. It's just a guidance. There's going to be a lot of grey zone here. It's just the Ukrainians will control land behind where the Russian lines are. Of course, well, not in front of where the Russian lines are, but exactly where I'm never quite sure. So anyway, I was going to show you what Suryat maps indicates that the Russians have taken, and that is down in this area, just literally half a block there. That, not even half a block. So that tiny bit of land there, that is what the pro-Russian mapper suggests that the Russians have taken in the whole of Bakhmut. So possibly relatively quiet. It's not relatively quiet. It's not quiet. Bakhmut is fierce fighting going on the whole time, but not too much to report from what the mappers are saying. Let's go to, before we go to ISW, let's see what Rebar has to say. Pro-Russian source says Wagner PMC assault groups are conducting an offensive near Kreminna in order to cut off one of the two remaining roads to Bakhmut. The enemy understands the importance of the road and is trying to counterattack to push Russian units back. In the northern districts of Bakhmut, Wagner PMC assault groups continue to push the enemy. Russian fighters have occupied several blocks in the area of Chania Kuviskoho and Tolbihina streets, coming up close to the Olympic Reserve School. To the south, the front line is gradually shifting to the west, fighting for Huria. The Skovorody Street is taking place. So that is where we were just talking about. Just to remind you again, that is in this area. So if we look at the names of the road, yeah, that's that road there. So that's the road that Rebar are talking about. Fighting is taking place around there. Despite losing positions along the railway line, the Ukrainians continue to desperately fight back. They're not just going to give up, I guess, now. So that is the situation as according to those mappers. We'll see if ISW has anything to add of significance. So the ISW has a lot to say about what's going on the road, the 00506 road at Kreminna. We'll come on to that. It says geolocated footage published on April the 20th indicates that the Russian forces advance west of Dubovo-Vasilivka. So this is Dubovo-Vasilivka is up here. Let's see if that holds out. So there are advances to the west of here, and that was a claim from the April 20th, so that is now 2 days ago. But the claim is here. Joint work of the Ukrainian artillery, infantry and territorial defense force on the enemy units, so the Russians. So taking out Russians in trenches. Where are they doing that? And we'll plug that into good old Google Maps and see if this does indicate an advance to the west. I think it will be somewhat. So again, I haven't moved mapping around there for some number of days, I don't think. So I don't think that indicates, to me at least, that there are advances to the west. It could be that they're consolidating positions in trenches in that area. But I would say that's the usual kind of not sure quite how up to date the claims of the ISW are when it comes to marginal advances and whatnot. So as far as they're concerned, they continue that there's geolocated footage to suggest that the railway stations in the south and centre of Bakhmut have been taken. I'd agree with that. Okay, so let's find out what the claims are about this highway, because this is super important. If that goes at Kreminna, the Ukrainians are in trouble. So it's this particularly around this area, and this is where all the trench networks are set up. So the ISW says Russian mill bloggers claim that Wagner forces advanced towards Kreminna and captured positions along the highway between Kreminna and Chaziv Yar. A Russian mill blogger claimed that there are reports that Russian forces captured a several hundred-meter section of the highway in an unspecified location, but a majority of Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces have not physically cut off the highway. Advisor to the DNR head Yan Gagin announced that Wagner forces had cut off a section of highway and that this would make it impossible to supply the remaining Ukrainian grouping in Bakhmut. So it wouldn't, because there's still another road that they can use. Wagner financier Prigozhin denied that Wagner forces have encircled Bakhmut and stated that rumors about encirclement create problems for Wagner, which is continuing to fight heavy battles in the area. DNR head Denis Pushilin also denied Gagin's claims and stated that he would work with his advisors on avoiding reckless statements about the situation in Bakhmut. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces would still be able to use tight logistics lines between Ivaniska and Kromova in the event of the Russian capture of that section or a section of the 00506 highway. Although mill bloggers claim that heavy rains are only permitting tracked vehicles to move along country roads in the area. Claims of an unsuccessful attack in Bodonivka, which is near to Kromova. So that's the situation really in Bakhmut. Just one more bit of footage to show you, which I think indicates how. Let's get that large for you. Indicates what it's like in Bakhmut. So the shelling here, you can see smoke all over the shop as artillery is hammering buildings and causing fires, and makes those buildings very difficult to defend. Pretty tough. And yeah, always time for a bit of music. It appears on virtually every Ukrainian video. So Bakhmut is looking pretty difficult at the moment for the Ukrainians, but one must assume that it's still worth holding on to. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. I think it's worth stating this. It almost sounds, it's a truism. It's completely obvious, but Ukraine are arguing that it's worth holding on to Bakhmut, right? And it therefore must be worth holding on to Bakhmut, right? They're not going to wake up in the morning, the advisors, and go, do you know what? Let's hold Bakhmut because it's a really crap decision to do so. We know it's rubbish, but we're going to do it anyway. At worst, they would say it's possibly not sort of militarily, tactically worth holding on to Bakhmut, but there is a larger gain politically speaking. But even then, it's worth holding on to. That's the point. It's like that political gain is worth the military loss of the territory, of the tactical advantage of holding this place or that place, right? So whichever way you look at it, it is worth the Ukrainians holding on to this as far as the people who are making the decisions are concerned. Now, you might disagree with those decisions. You might say that those calculations are incorrect. They're plugging some incorrect data in here or there. But considering you don't know how they're plugging in that data, you don't know what their calculations particularly are. All you can do is speculate. All I can do is speculate. So therefore, what I do is say, it is worth holding the Ukrainians holding on to Bakhmut because the Ukrainians have deemed it worth holding on to Bakhmut, and they are making the decision to do so. Like I can second guess them, but I don't know what basis I would have to do that on because I don't have nearly as much information as the people in Bakhmut. So there are an awful lot of mappers saying, or an analyst saying it's terrible. People on Twitter actually know quite a lot and know loads more than I do, saying it's a terrible decision. I wouldn't go out on a limb to do that. I would trust that they're making the right decision, and the only way to know that they made the wrong decision will be historically speaking, like looking back on this and go, actually, they did plug in the wrong data because we know now that this element of what they're saying was incorrect or that element was incorrect. But I don't know that now. You don't know that now, and so you kind of have to trust that, and that might be uncomfortable. So at the best, you just say, I don't know. I don't know if it's the right decision. But what I'm saying is, they believe it's the right decision because if they didn't, they wouldn't be doing this. It's that simple. Like, as I say, no one goes, I'm going to make a really crap decision now. That's what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm just going to make the worst decision I possibly can. Let's do it. Woohoo! Let's lose loads of lives. It's a terrible decision, and I know it is. No one does that. So they go, I'm going to make what I think is the best decision based on this rationale and these inputs, right? And this data. Some of those inputs and data could be wrong, and so it ends up being an objectively bad decision. But for them at that point, they are making that calculation. It's a good decision. It's a correct decision. So for them, it is still the best decision for the Ukrainians to hold on to Bakhmut, and they appear to be treating the Russians still at the levels that they hope is advantageous for them in the long run. So, I guess that's all you can successfully say about Bakhmut, and that's my opinion. I'd be really interested to see what you think. Anyway, moving away from Bakhmut, we will come down to Avdivka, which is further down south past Toretsk and New York and Shumi, and to Avdivka, and we'll see what the different sources have to say. So the ISW mentions the usual places. So Novokalynove, Stepovo, Kamyanka. So those are in the north. So we've got Kamyanka just holding out still, it appears here. Stepovo as well, really important to stop the encirclement coming from the north. And Novokalynove, which is just up here to the west of Novobakhmutivka. So much activity going on in the northern areas. Also talks about Pervomaisky, Nevelsky, and then goes on to say Marinka and Pobyeda. No particular details really about Avdivka. So just to let you know, Pervomaisky is there. So activity in Nevelska. So there are some mapping changes for Suryat maps in this area in Nevelsky, which says, so Suryat maps say, corrections were made south of Nevelska. Ukrainian army is still showing control of the areas inside the 2014 front line. On the other hand, the Russian army have made small advances east of the town further north. So actually, that's not to say that there's activity that's given the Ukrainians an advantage there. They're saying corrections, but I don't know. At some point, that probably was under Russian control and then taken back. But that's in this kind of area with a bit of a marginal gain for the Russians, according to them, up here. Nevelsky is very important. There's lots of entrenchments all over the shop here. You can see these little elements here. This one there was known as the reservoir. I think that was an old sort of water reservoir or something. And there are this is old 2018 mapping that Google Maps here, and there are still, you can see trench networks still on that because there's been fighting here for some time, long before the war, and there's still fighting here. And places like Nevelska, this whole area is littered with trenches along every single tree line and bunkers and whatnot. Because this is so important for the Ukrainians to hold this. Without this, they lose Pervomaisky, or Pervomaisky can be encircled, and then that allows the Russians to advance further down here, which then makes Avdivka even less tenable for their struggle to hold it, because it will cut off certain roads or aspects of certain roads, and so on and so forth. So it's really important that Ukrainians keep hold of Stepovo. Really important they keep hold of Nevelska, which allows them to keep hold of Pervomaisky, and therefore hold Avdivka. So that's what Suryat map says. Kenneth Gregg continues about Avdivka. At the writing, information was received that at Avdivka, small but good things are happening. The Russians tried to rotate their troops on the southeastern edge of Pervomaisky, but were caught by our soldiers from the 59th Motorized Brigade. In the last 2 weeks, we have taken several hundred prisoners of war. So they've taken quite a few here as well as up in Bakhmut. Preparations for the offensive continue. It is, as they say in poker, all in. It has also become official that we actually have a lot more weapons than you are led to believe. Not only Western weapons, but also our own production. In particular, we have more air defense and air attack weapons. Since we do not have aircraft, that means we have special robots. Interesting. The SBU is also working at full speed. They have arrested a number of spies within our legal system, so on and so forth. Goes on to talk about corruption and things going on there. Now, the ISW, so if we go back to Pule Volon's map, here is the suggestion that it's all happening around the north and the south. Exactly as I said, that Ukrainians had gained some land back over the last few weeks from this Russian push out of Vodyany and Pervomaisky. That isn't in accordance with other mappers. Other mappers will have the Russians having, I think, some of this area still under their control, as is reflected in my map here. So actually further north and knocking on the door of Severny. But there's some disagreement between Syriac map in red and Deep State map in yellow there. And as we come down, is some talk about Marinka. It says that geolocated footage published on April the 17th indicates that Russian forces likely made marginal gains in Marinka. Okay, let's go and check that to see if that holds out. So my mapping, if we come down to Marinka here, my mapping hasn't really changed for a couple of weeks in the main Marinka area. It changed to the south near Pobyeda recently, as the Ukrainians have counterattacked there. So this footage, and it's well worth looking at this footage, someone has spliced together both the footage from the kamikaze drone hitting a Russian tank and the Russian tank footage itself that has some kind of cage to protect it from such munition. And as you can see, the cage is there on top, and the drone is coming in. Bang. And hits the tank. Obviously, the tank is still moving. I don't know what the damage is. Unsure. Nonetheless, it's been geolocated, as you can imagine, because that's what people spend a lot of time doing. It's geolocated where it was struck. So we'll plug that in, and also where its firing position is. So this tank is a long way back. So that for first person view drone is hitting a tank that's well behind. I don't know how you can say that suggests that there is a marginal gain. Again, we'll look at another geolocation for it to see if its firing position is any further advanced from where that was. And right, okay, now we can. So the question is, let's go and read what it says, because I was unsure whether this is what it is firing on or its position it's firing from. So hit on the Russian tank on that street. So as we saw, that's quite a long way behind. Russian tank firing position on street, and then it gives that second location. So to be honest, I don't know whether that is where it's firing at or whether that's where it ended up, and it was firing from being in that position. So if we look at these, the geolocation there for the first-person view drone gives that indication, and then yeah, the tank. I don't know. It looks like the tank could well be in that position. I just don't know. So it could be that the tank has moved further forward, and that does show a slight advancement. And in fact, I was jumping the gun to be a bit harsh about ISW, saying that likely made marginal gains in Marinka. They might well have made marginal gains in the center. But I guess we'll have to wait to see. Anyway, let's now get back onto the rest of the map. Although, just to say, Vuhledar's map shows that the Russians are pushing in to the north of the water feature, and they're trying to push in towards Pobyeda, but the Ukrainians have taken that land back in that area. So that's Vuhledar's map there. Right, if we go to look at what the ISW say. Russian forces conducted a limited ground attack in western Donetsk on the 21st. The Ukrainian General Staff reported Russian forces conducted an unsuccessful ground attack near Vuhledar. A geolocated footage published on the 20th indicates that Russian forces made marginal gains north of Mikilska. So let's go and look at where Mikilska is as we come down past Novomykhailivka. We come to Vuhledar, which is Vuhledar on the elevated ground as it looks over the lower ground to the south in Pavlivka and Mikilska, and there is some geolocated footage that I'm going to check in the Mikilska area. So the references to a Russian helicopter blowing up their own BMPs. So a couple of one video showing Russian flyers for some reason effed up their own boxes, meaning shot their own infantry fighting vehicles. The Russian helicopter destroyed abandoned BMPs, says this source, and a tank, probably Russian. The first IFV is here, so which means that the Russians were at this point for them to blow up their own vehicles. I don't know if that's to stop the Ukrainians getting them, or whether they thought they were Russians, or whether this source is being incorrect. Nonetheless, the claim is that that's First Russian vehicle is there, and the second Russian vehicle is here. Let's see if I can get my fingers to do what they're supposed to. And the second one is slightly further advanced. So does that show marginal gains? It shows that there were Russian vehicles, one behind the lines I already have and one in front in the grey zone. Does that mean they control those areas? Absolutely not. There may be advances here, but I would suggest that I wouldn't hold to the conclusion that the Russians have advanced in that area. It means that there are destroyed Russian vehicles in the grey zone, is what that tells me. So anyway, that's what the ISW says about the area there, and we'll go on to the rest of Donetsk and Zaporizhia. Okay, the ISW suggests that a source states that the Ukrainians have made an unspecified gain in the Zaporizhia area, so somewhere around here, says that Ukrainian forces captured an unspecified section of a contested area of the front line in Zaporizhia Oblast, but there's no visual confirmation of that, no kind of detail of that. Now, we're going to go on to talk about, and I showed you the Telegram post translated where this was from, but I didn't really read it out to you, but the just for time reasons yesterday, but actually it appears that the ISW dwells on this quite a bit. So all of this section here talks about this in the Kherson area, so I am going to read it. Russian sources claim that Russian forces have established, because I think it's super important, if they have established positions on the East Bank, so this is to claim that the Ukrainians have established a position on the East Bank of the Dnipro River in a place called, and it's close to, I think, the Antonivsky Bridge, which is there. I think it's going to be around here somewhere. Anyway, oh look, there's another Mikilska. So it says, a prominent Russian mill blogger claimed on April the 20th that Ukrainian forces established a foothold across the Kindaika and regularly conduct sorties on the east or left bank of the Western provided left bank with Western provided naval equipment. The mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces have not attempted to move further inland because of supply issues, and that recent attempts to advance from coastal areas on Valaiki, Potemkin, and Dnipriani islands in the Dnipro River Delta have failed for similar reasons. The mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces are now able to cross the Dnipro River during the day, whereas they previously conducted such crossings only at night. Now, the problem with making such crossings and getting a foothold on one side of the other side of the Dnipro is if the Russians know you're there, then they can just hammer you, and you're only going to have a small area to control. You know, it's when you can start getting much larger areas that kind of activity becomes easier. But yeah, there's I don't know if that's Dnipriani, an area there. The Valenki Potemkin Island is down here in this area. Yeah, it's this one there, I believe. Anyway, it continues. The mill blogger blamed bureaucratic red tape for preventing Russian artillery units in the area from conducting timely strikes on Ukrainian groups crossing the river. Another Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces successfully landed and entrenched themselves west of the Antonivsky Bridge and have established stable supply lines to these positions. A different prominent Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces have a small bridgehead on an unspecified island in the Dnipro River Delta close to the east or left bank, but that the positions provide access only to floodplain swamp areas. The mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces appear to be preparing a serious landing across the Dnipro to create one or multiple bridgeheads. ISW has not observed visual confirmation of Ukrainian forces maintaining positions on the left bank. One of the mill bloggers speculated that Russian forces may be conducting river crossings in order to divert Russian forces' attention to this sector in the front and set conditions for a potential upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive. I think this is super fascinating. And if there's any truth to this, and I think there might well be, I wonder, I've talked to you about whether, as the Ukrainians push for a counteroffensive in this kind of area and cutting down somewhere in multiple places or whatever they do around there, that I think if they can get a foothold across in a number of places, then that allows them to fix Russian troops here and will allow them the Ukrainians to have greater success over towards the east, in the sort of Zaporizhia direction. And if it doesn't just fix, if they are also able to successfully breach the river and get a foothold and be able to supply it successfully, then that will help to actually squeeze and attack the Russians from both sides. So I think, if I've often thought that this would be too difficult to get across and too problematic, but the Ukrainians have been provided an awful lot of riverine boats. There's quite a lot of naval equipment or maritime equipment that they've been given by the states and other countries. So it could well be doable that they at least get some kind of presence on the eastern bank, to give the Russians something to think about. But anyway, let me know what you think. That's the end of today's update. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the time you spend with me. All the ways you can support the channel in the description below. Tomorrow, Sunday, will be another day of difficult timing for videos, so hopefully I'll get them out at some point, but it could be a bit funky. Really appreciate it. Take care. Speak soon.